you grade 11s for completing our do now. So the do now has a direct correspondence with what we're going to be looking at in today's lesson. With the use of critical thinking and being able to have questions about things that we see and be able to break them down into key responses. So we looked at in the previous lessons what an infographic was. So what is an infographic? So it's a bit of data gathered, and they use images to create like a poster using said data to tell a point. So we looked at a bit more depth, but that's just a quick brief overview of what an actual infographic was. If for the kids who weren't here yesterday or the last lesson, I have put the information on our email. I've sent you an email with it. So if you need more information, it'll be on there, and I can, after class, go into a little bit more depth. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be able to obviously break down what an infographic is. So we've been looking at it a bit further, but we're going to be putting in these things called higher ordering questions. So higher order thinking questions and breaking them, the infographic down using those questions. So obviously we'll quickly go over our learning goals. So students will be able to break down an infographic. So we're going to be working a bit more on that. And secondly, students will be able to use higher order questioning to write a response based on the infographic. So we're going to be creating written responses using those higher order thinking questions. So higher order thinking. Now, I hear a lot of people here asking me, well, sir, what is higher order thinking? I haven't really been heard of it before. That's okay. We'll go a bit more in depth into it. So, higher order thinking is often used to refer to transfer critical thinking and problem solving. These can be described in three different ways. So, obviously, the first one is transfer. So, it's the ability to apply knowledge and skills to new contexts. So, we're going to be able to use our own abilities, our own skills, and our own knowledge from before we were entered this class or before we saw the bit of media. And we're going to be using those skills and knowledge to be able to break it down. So, if you think about like you see a math problem, you're going to use some skills you learnt from previous years in math to help you break down that question. The second is critical thinking, so the ability to reason, reflect, and decide what to believe or do next. So you're going to take in information and you're going to try and go, okay, well, what do I believe? I hear this information from one side, I hear this information from another side. How and what do I believe? The reasons reflect. So you're going to be able to break these down using your own critical thinking. And lastly, is problem solving. So meeting a goal that cannot be met with a measured solution. So we're going to be putting goals for us in this infographic of like, what have they not specifically said? What are they actually trying to say? So these are the goals we're going to put up here. What did they not specifically try to say, but what are they actually trying to say? These are your problem solving. You're going to be using the problem solving skills you've used throughout your life, and we're going to be applying them into a written infographic review. So, the four main questions we're going to be looking at today with the use of higher order thinking are such follows. So, you're going to be looking at four different types. So, the first is your understanding, so what you understand. Second is how can you apply it? So, we're going to apply is a bit of a spicy one. We're going to be looking at that a bit in detail. Thirdly is analysis. So obviously, how do you look at it and you break it down a little bit? And lastly, evaluate. What do you get out of it? What's the end result? So understand. So the question is, can you explain why and what is the difference between? So can you explain why it's trying to tell me something? And what is the difference between this and something else I've heard? So you're going to be using that infographic knowledge and your own previous knowledge to create your own solution of what you understand. Secondly, apply. How do you solve? So we're going to be using this in sort of a context way of we're going to be reverting it. What does the infographic try to solve? What is it trying to tell us? We're going to apply our own inverse version of it. So this is the version that we use for teaching, but we're going to do the inverse of it. We're going to be going, okay, what was the person who created this trying to solve at the start? Thirdly, is analysis. What facts does the author, in this case, the person who created the infographic, offer to support their opinion? So what are the facts and where are they getting it from to support their own opinion? So a lot of infographics don't actually, some of them won't actually say where they get their facts, and that will come into your appliance of analysis because we can go, well, it's obviously can be a bit biased because, well, where are they getting their facts from? And fourthly, is evaluate. Is blank better or worse than blank? So not always will they have the case of one statistic versus another statistic. Sometimes they will have these statistics of one side but not the other. And why do you reckon? So we're going to use our critical thinking skills of why do you reckon they didn't add that bit of statistics? So these are our four questions. I want you to write down each four because we're going to be using them for our next task coming up. So we're going to move on into our first activity. So I'm going to be doing the first two questions and then we're going to do it together. And then I'm going to get after this activity, I'm going to give you a new infographic and then you're going to be able to use these four questions and break them down and break down the infographic. So firstly, let me help you let me explain how we're going to use these questions. So the first one is understand. Can you explain why and what is the difference between something and something? So, in this infographic, workers don't get pregnant, do they? So the author is trying to show what the discrimination of women who are pregnant in the workforce. So, why? Can you explain why? So why is it being made? So he wants to detail what is happening with women in the workforce who are getting pregnant. And what is the difference between who? So if we go a bit further down, it talks about how women are going to be discriminated against more because they become pregnant. So, and between that and men who obviously don't become pregnant. So it's showing you the prejudice in workers and how women can be discriminated against just for becoming pregnant. So, secondly, is apply. So how do you solve? So, what was the original author trying to solve in this infographic? What were they trying to tell us? So, obviously, we know from Understand that he was trying to detail what is discrimination in the workforce with pregnancy and how the difference between men and women deal with prejudice. So, obviously, we know women deal with a lot more prejudice because of pregnancy. So, what would we think that workers don't, what do we think they were trying to solve? So if we use our little critical thinking apps, and we know I use experience from my work as I was working up until this point, always said women are a lot more likely to get prejudiced against because they are likely to they actually can become pregnant. Is that a problem? No, of course not. So what does the author try to solve here? It's trying to solve the issue of discrimination against women just because they can become pregnant. That is his driving focal point with this infographic. It's detailing to us what is the problem in today's workforce and the discrimination behind it. So the problem is that women are being wrongfully discriminated against just because they become pregnant. So now let's work as a group and let's do the next two questions together. So, analysis. What facts does the author offer to support their opinions? So, does anyone here know in the statistic where is he getting his facts from? Thank you. In the back? Yes. So, he's getting his facts from the EEOC 1992 to 2007. So, he's found statistics that back up his claim. So, he wrote there that the increase in pregnancy discrimination changes filed. So, it has risen by 65% because that's where he's found his information, that he's found it from a bureau that's saying, yes, there is a great rise in discrimination. So, we can see it throughout this infographic of the rise in discrimination. So, do you reckon all their statistics would come from this one place, or do you reckon they'll come from multiple? Yes. Well, in this case, for this infographic, I think he's gotten a lot of his statistics from this one place. But that is okay because if it is a peer-reviewed peer-reviewed study, sorry, can we say this is scientific? Thank you. Yes, we can, because a lot of people who are specifically specialized in this field have stated, yes, this is a problem and we do need to fix it. And this is where we've gotten our evidence from. Now, lastly, we're going to do elevate. So, is something better or worse than others? Other than other. So in this infographic, where can we see this being applied? You in the back there. Thank you. So it says first-time mums who worked during pregnancy. So 44% in 1960 and 66% in 2015. So women are now more likely to work after getting pregnant than they were from the 60s to 2015. That is a 55-year gap in time. It's quite a lot of time. But now, because of that gap, we've been seeing a lot more rise in statistics. So if we go back to using our critical thinking gaps, what can we see there's a direct link to? Yes. So now, because we have a direct rise from women starting to work back in the workforce, that people start to think that it's okay to discriminate against them due to their prejudices. And we can see this using the statistics that is found throughout this infographic. So we now have answered our 4 questions. So now I want you to go on to our next infographic that I'm about to put on the board, and I want you to answer those 4 questions as well. Are we able to do that for us, for me today? Thank you, grade 11s. Okay, let's move on. So now, as you see, we're looking at youth crime. So use the 4 questions to dissect the infographic. So you're going to go back as like I did and as we did together, sorry, and you're going to break down this infographic using those 4 questions. And out of those 4 questions, we can then, in our next lesson, create a response using those 4 questions. Thank you.